أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Over the last number of weeks we have talked about the teachings of Ahlul Bayt with respect to our relationship with our society, our fellow believers, and members of our community. One of the things that is an essential part of our Islamic teachings in terms of our community and our community building is to honor the institutions that preserve our religious life and our identity. Sometimes we tend to think of our belief and our faith as an individual choice, but we forget that our individual identity and our individual choices are fashioned by the culture and the institutions that exist within society. It's ironic that many people who want to express their individuality will do so by choosing fashions, clothing, manners of speech that come from popular culture. Movies, celebrities, songs, athletes, and other parts of popular culture. There is an individual choice, but that choice is fashioned and limited or broadened by the culture and the institutions that exist within society. A society that places a great deal of priority and importance on wealth will encourage people to prioritize wealth over maybe their health, maybe their dignity, maybe their families. A society that places a great deal of importance on knowledge may find that people will prioritize seeking knowledge even over the acquisition of wealth. And a society that prioritizes values and righteousness and piety will help people make the individual choice to prioritize piety over power, over wealth, over enjoyment, and over many other things that our human nature may enjoy and may want. But we will prioritize it as a choice which will be affected by the institutions that we have within society. And this is why it is so important in Islam for us to establish and to support houses of worship and learning which solidify our Islamic identity and our Islamic sense of belonging. That is a very important part of our Islamic value system. Because for us, we don't just want an educated community, we don't just want a powerful community, We don't just want a wealthy community, we want a community that is oriented towards justice, towards righteousness, towards sacrificing in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the institution that is intended to preach and to strengthen and to preserve across the generations this value system is our masjid. It is a place of worship. It is a place of social gathering. It is a place of learning and education. It is the focal point and the center of our Muslim communal life and our spiritual life. When the Quran says, "Aqimus salah," it is not just telling us to pray, but it is telling us to establish prayer, a foundation, and a culture, and a value system of prayer. Pray in Arabic is sallu, but aqimus salah means to establish that prayer, so that not only do I do it, but it becomes a part of my second nature. It becomes part of my practice in my family, and it becomes part of my shared practice with my community. It becomes something that we pass on from one generation to another generation, and not something that our coming generations will say, yes, my parents or my grandparents, they used to pray in a special way at certain times, but I am not familiar with it. Aqimus salah means to make it firmly established and rooted and present in our individual life, but also in our communal life. And this is why it is so important for us to have institutions and places where that value system is practiced and is passed on. So what are some of the teachings of Ahlul Bayt with regard to the importance of masajid? First, let us look at a hadith of Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. He describes those things which are sadaqah jariyah, those things which are a form of good deed that lasts after our material life comes to an end. And many of us are familiar with this idea of sadaqah jariyah. It means that if we have a limited lifespan, our good deeds don't have to be limited. If we set in motion a good action that remains after our death, then it is as if we are alive, and the good deed and the good effect of that action that we took in our lifetime, it will continue to be written for us even after our death. So our spiritual lifespan will be much longer than our physical lifespan. In one hadith, our Prophet says that there are sab'atu ashya yuktabu lil-'abd thawabuha ba'da wafatih. There are 7 things that the reward of these things will be written for a person even after their death. And notice that these are both worldly benefits and spiritual benefits. Meaning if I do something that provides a worldly benefit to people, then it will be written for me after my death. And if I do something that provides a religious benefit to people, then it will be written for me after my death. These are things for us to make goals in our life, priorities in my life. If you have a list of things that you want to do before you die, then to do as many of these things which the Prophet says will give you eternal life or will give you an ability to become immortal, that should be at the top of the list. Because my body will die, but my good deeds will live on, and the reward will continue to be written for me. One is, if you plant a tree that bears fruit, And if you do it for Allah, then that tree might continue to bear fruit, or people might benefit from it and plant other trees, and it will continue to feed people and benefit people even after your death. Or a person who digs a well and provides water to people who don't have water. Now, sometimes we might think this is not a relevant concern for us, but there are people in this country and there are people throughout the world who don't have safe or sufficient drinking water. And if I can contribute to provide a family or a village with safe and secure and plentiful drinking water, then that is an example of what the Prophet is saying. This is not just for that many centuries ago when people lived in the desert. Even today, there are many people here in this country, and not limited to Flint, Michigan or Jacksonville, but in many places where drinking water is not safe or it is not available. So a person who digs a well to provide water, or a person who causes a canal or a river to flow and provide water and cooling and irrigation to a place that did not have that irrigation. So these are things that are worldly benefits. To help people have food, to help people have water, to help people acquire their basic material necessities to live a life. And then there are some examples that pertain to our religion. Or a person, bana masjidan, if you build a masjid, which doesn't necessarily mean a grand building, but if you contribute and you provide the resources for a musalla, for a masjid to exist. A person who writes a copy of the Quran. Remember, before printing, every copy of the Quran was written by hand, and it was a very deliberate and a very painstaking process for people to write it and check it and double check it to make sure that not a single letter or a single dot or a single vowel sign was mistaken. So every copy of the Quran was hundreds and hundreds of hours of work and effort. So this is one example the Prophet mentions. وَوَرَّثَ عِلْمًا, or a person who passes on a heritage of ilm. These are 6 things: planting a tree, digging a well, causing a canal for irrigation or for water to be there, to build a masjid, to write a copy of the Quran, or to pass on knowledge that benefits people in their religious life, in their well-being of body and of soul. And then خَلَّفَ وَلَدًا صَالِحًا يَسْتَغْفِرُ لَهُ بَعْدَ وَفَاتِهِ. The 7th and final thing mentioned by the Prophet is that if you leave a salih, good offspring that will seek forgiveness for you and that will carry on your values, and that is perhaps the most important thing. Sometimes people, they think that their charity is the material things that they give in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the most important charity that you can give in the way of Allah is to raise children who will live the values of Islam. Because no matter how much money you can give, or no matter how much time you can give yourself, that is going to be there for your lifespan. But if you raise somebody who is a pious believer, that girl or that boy will live their life, and they will spend their time, and they will spend their money, and they will use that education that you helped them to acquire, and they will raise their own families in accordance with the values and the teachings of Islam. And the aggregate of the time and the money and the effort that your children will give in the way of Allah is much more than the material amount of time or money that you would be able to spend. So to raise a pious family and to put effort into making sure that your values are passed on, that is extremely important for the well-being of our community and for the preservation of our own good deeds beyond our physical lifespan. So out of these 7 things, 3 pertain to the worldly benefit, providing food and water to people. 3 pertain to religious benefit, masjid, Quran, and ilm. And the 7th and final is to have a worthy offspring that will pass on our values in helping their community materially and helping their community religiously. It's both material and spiritual. One of those things is bana masjidan. Not just to have ilm, not just to have a mushaf, but to have a communal home and an institution. Because that is where all of these good deeds will be demonstrated. The importance of a masjid is not just in building it, but in maintaining it. In one hadith, our Prophet Muhammad is reported to have said, "Ibnul masajid wa akhrijul qumamata minha, faman bana lillahi bana Allahu lahu baytan fil jannah." The Prophet is reported to have said that build your masajid and then go and volunteer to keep them clean. Remove dirt or any kind of trash from those masajid. If you build that for the sake of Allah, then Allah will build it for you in the hereafter. It doesn't just mean that people with money who can donate, they have the opportunity to build a castle for themselves in Jannah. If I come and I volunteer and I vacuum the masjid, I clean up. Even if I just come to attend a program and as I leave Jum'ah, I see something outside, it's on the ground, I pick it up and I throw it away. To keep the masjid looking clean and inviting for its attendees and its visitors. That is one of the ways that we can make this institution thrive. And then there is a hadith of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. This hadith is expressed in numerous different words. This is one version of the hadith. Most likely these different words are because Imam Ali repeated this message in different words at different times. So one of those words is where the Imam said, "Inna Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala idha arada an yusiba ahla al-ardi bi'adhab." Sometimes Allah says that the people of the earth have committed so much injustice and so much evil that they are worthy of being punished for their evil. They have earned punishment from the heavens, as previous communities they had earned punishment. But then Allah, when He looks at the people of the earth, He finds that there are some people, not the majority, not everybody, but some people who are doing good. And the specific good deeds mentioned, لَوْلَا الَّذِينَ يَتَحَابُونَ بِجَلَالِ. There are some people who have a mutual love and affection, not because of worldly benefit, not because of family ties. They have affection for one another for the sake of Allah. Because of Allah, they have a connection with people that otherwise they might not have any other cultural, economic, or social connection with. Second, وَيَعْمُرُونَ مَسَاجِدِي. And they make my houses of worship thrive. They make them amir rather than kharab, meaning they are alive rather than abandoned. Sometimes you can have a very beautiful masjid, but if it's empty, it's just a museum. It doesn't actually provide a benefit to the community. So those who keep the masjids alive by attending, by praying, by teaching, by making sure that it is not empty. وَيَسْتَغْفِرُونَ بِالْأَسْحَارِ. And those who wake up early in the morning at sahar time and they ask forgiveness from Allah. These people are not all of humanity. There are many other people who are doing evil. But because these groups exist, لَوْلَاهُمْ لَأَنزَلْتُ عَذَابِي. If they didn't exist, then I would have punished all of the people. Because there are some who preserve the good teachings of Islam through their practice, through their mutual affection for one another, through their seeking forgiveness from Allah, through their keeping the masjids alive, Allah averts the punishment, and this punishment may be the removal of blessings, it may be the withholding of the material and social and economic blessing that makes life seem to be fulfilling and blessed. When Allah sees a few people who keep alive His religion and the values of His religion, then He averts a punishment from the rest of humanity that they may have earned through their own evil actions. And so here, one of the three things mentioned, one is istighfar, and one is tahab, or a mutual affection among believers. One is to have the masjid be a place that is kept alive and thriving, and with people present, praying and making use of it. Because if that is there, then as time passes, there is hope that the teachings and the purity of that religious practice, it will spread to others as well. There is always going to be a period of up and down in religious practice. It happens in our own lives. Sometimes we get busy, we get distracted, and for a few weeks or months, sometimes for a few years, a person, they are not as present for their religion as they should be. But then, if we have, in good times, established good habits, there is a path for us to return. Meaning, when I got married, if I made sure that I married somebody who is a believer, when I was making my friendships, if I chose friends who were also pious and good people, when I was thinking about where to buy a house, if I chose a place that would facilitate my involvement with my community and my masjid, then even if I go through that low period in my life, when I'm very busy, when I am distracted, those connections that I made in good times, they will bring me back sooner or later. It's natural in human life, but if I have made good decisions, then I will be able to come back and maintain the strength of my faith and my identity. The same thing applies within a community. Sometimes there are periods of war. There are periods of economic difficulty or social instability or political instability. And religious life, it is affected by those events that take place within society. If as a community we have established good practices, we have thriving houses of worship, we have institutions that can serve us, then rather than having hundreds of people, sometimes we may only have tens of people, but the institution will be there. And inshallah, when times are better, it can serve its purpose in a more complete manner. But if we don't have those institutions, if we have not invested, then we might be in a much more difficult position. So let's remember that when it comes to our religious institutions, don't think, what has that institution done for me? Because our masajid, our houses of worship, these are not meant to serve me as an individual. They are meant to serve our community as a collective. My relationship is to want to give and to contribute. And when the time comes, I will benefit either directly with material help or indirectly with blessings and with God's grace and spiritual help. It will provide a benefit to our community, and it will preserve our religion and our values for the future. One final hadith. This is narrated from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It is reported the Prophet says that think of Shaytan as a wolf. Just like a wolf hunts sheep, then Shaytan hunts people. Generally, when a wolf hunts, if there is a flock of sheep that are grazing, it doesn't go to those sheep that are close to one another. It looks for the sheep that is grazing off in the distance, away from all of the other sheep, and it has an easier time hunting and then eating that stray, solitary sheep. So the Prophet says that Shaytan is the same way. If you are connected to your community, connected to your masjid, if you are not isolated, and you're not taking your religion from YouTube and online, but rather you are connected to your community, then Shaitan will not have an easy time hunting you, because there are things that are keeping you. And in fact, there are studies that tell us that those people who go towards extremism, those people who joined these extremist groups like ISIS, one of the factors that they had in common is that they were not part of a masjid. They did not have real human connections. They learned about their Islam through videos and through articles and chat groups online. The connection is what keeps you well-rounded, balanced, protected. Shaitan can hunt you by making you extremist. Shaitan can hunt you by taking you away from your faith. But if you are connected to your community, then you are protected from that attack of Shaitan, and our institutions are what give us that protection. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar. Inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما علي أمير المؤمنين وعلى فاطمة الزهراء وعلى الحسن والحسين وعلي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهدي صلوات الله عليهم أجمعين. صلوات. I seek forgiveness from Allah for myself, all of us present, and all mu'mineen and mu'minat. And I praise Allah for His untold bounties and blessings that He has shown us. In the second khutbah, just one hadith, which is related to the importance of our houses of worship, and which also mentions other attributes as a reminder for us of what constitutes muruwa. Muruwa is the Islamic concept of chivalry and honor. And this is an important concept that is protective of our faith. Faith, it thrives in a healthy environment. And muruwa is part of that healthy environment. Sense of dignity and honor and chivalry. Our first Imam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, he says there are 6 categories of actions, or 6 types of actions, 6 qualities that are important in honor and chivalry. 3 of them are for when you are traveling, and 3 of them are for when you are in your own city. The ones that are in your own city are reciting Quran, to make sure the masjid thrives by donating, by volunteering your time, by being present and praying and utilizing. And to have ikhwan fillah, to have friendships that are through and for Allah. Not just people who share your hobby or your interest or your job, but who share your intention of living and working for the sake of Allah. Those are the 3 qualities of honor and chivalry when you are in your own hometown. Read Quran, visit the masjid, and have friendships on the basis of faith. And when you are traveling, then badlu zad, be not stingy, but generous in sharing what you have brought, spend on your fellow travelers. Wa husnul khulq, be very gentle. Traveling can be stressful. You can have things that are unpredicted. Don't lose your temper and don't be irritable, but be very courteous and good-mannered. Wal mu'asharatu bil ma'ruf. And then when you interact with people, do it on the basis of ma'ruf, goodness and generosity. These are the attributes of muruwa, which Imam Ali has taught, the attributes of dignity and chivalry. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow all of us to maintain these characteristics of dignity and chivalry, and in particular, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those who establish the prayer, establish masajid, and strengthen them through our prayers, through our financial contribution, through our presence and our intentions and our sincerities. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون صلوا على صلاة الجمعة. الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن عليا ولي الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير